Okay, what up ladies and gents, it's your favorite Asian robot right here, hopefully your favorite Darktide YouTuber, and in this video, alright, I'm going to cover and do a review of all the new weapon variants that were introduced into the game in patch 16 as part of Traitor's Curse Part 2. Alright, yes, even the Ogryn weapons, I will cover every single one of these, alright. I've spent millions of order dockets rolling all of them so that you guys can get as close a comparison as possible. And yes, I'm literally going to go through every single one of these. We will start with the foldable shovels, the Sapper Shovel for the veteran, the Brute Brainer. Then we'll move on to all the chain weapons. Then we'll take a look at the Stub Revolver, the Laspistol, and finally the Combat Blade. Alright, so I hope you guys will look forward to this. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you want this video to get out there, please just hit the like button. That's all I ask of you. If you find this information helpful, hit the like button, and don't worry, I've timestamped all of it, so if you're not interested in all the weapons, you don't have to watch the full video. Alright, this is a full review, but you can literally just fast forward to the sections that you are interested in. Okay? Thank you guys very much. Enjoy the video. Enjoy the comparisons. Let's get started right away. Okay guys, let's start the section on the veteran shovels. The initial veteran shovel that we used to have in the past was the standard issue Munitorium Sapper Shovel. This shovel came with a light attack chain that was mostly strike down attacks and heavy attacks that were all relentless. Basically, your heavy attacks were for clearing hordes, your light attacks could be used for heavier targets. However, theoretically, you didn't normally use the light attacks at all and everybody just used the heavy attacks. Why? Because the standard shovel that we used to use in the past kind of functioned like this. When dealing with a horde, here's what you would do. You would just sort of swing through and absolutely devastate them while taking advantage of the high movement speed of the shovel, alright, to maneuver around and smack heads. Alright, the light attack chain was generally never used very much, while the special attack was mostly used for its high stagger potential. Right? Even if you encountered a big guy, you wouldn't usually use the strike down attacks, they'd be a bit too weak, except for the push attack, which could, be used to smack heads. Most of the time, you just use your blessings to do the heavy attacks, do a little bit of a push attack, heavy attack, push attack, you could do something like that. People also use the special attacks mostly to stab ragers in the head and stagger them. Alright? You could kind of do the same with mutants, by the way. So this is what the original Sapper Shovel was used for. Now, the new Sapper Shovels are pretty interesting because they can turn into pickaxes. Alright, I'll go through the Mark III first. The Mark III is quite awesome. It comes with 3 relentless attacks on the light attack chain and a strike down attack at the end. Alright, the heavy combination is a relentless and then a strike down. Its special attack would be to switch it into a pickaxe. Alright, so let's demonstrate. For this particular shovel, what you will generally do is use the light attacks to deal with hordes. Alright, so if you want to go around whacking hordes, this is the way you do it. The heavy attack would be more of a mixed bag, so you could kind of go like this one would go light. Oops, sorry. This one would be like heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light, if you enjoy that type of pattern, okay? And if you really had to deal with somebody, you'd probably use a push attack, strike down, push attack, strike down, something like that. Whatever would chain into the strike downs often enough. As for the pickaxe, even without any perks, it actually does quite a significant amount of damage. The light attack does significantly less than the heavy attack, but because it's always a strike down, you can actually use it to good effect. In fact, right, if you actually use this, okay, you can, now this is without any perks, guys. This is without any perks right now. You can actually use it to kill crushers, maulers, bulwarks, all that kind of stuff. And best of all, you can almost insta-give mutants. Alright, you can't really do it if you don't hit the head. But this is without perks. With perks, like say thrust or whatever else, I'm pretty sure you could destroy mutants fairly easily. And you don't even have to do the large attacks. You can just do a really quick pickaxe strike on the head like that. Alright. So that is what the current new shovel is used for. This is for the Mark III. The Mark VII, alright, is the other one. And I'm sorry, it's all the way back down here. I found one with good damage, penetration, first target. Now the stats on all the shovels are the same, okay? They've all got mobility, defenses, damage, penetration, first target. All of it's the same. They only differ in terms of the attack pattern. The attack pattern for this is double relentless and then 2 strike downs on the lights, but the heavy is all relentless. This would actually be the closest to the old shovel while still giving you the same viability with in dealing with armored targets using the strike down. All right, on the special. So this one would play pretty much exactly like how the old shovel played. Okay, doing that. And if you had to deal with an armored target, as you can see, it has a slight angle to the strike, but it deals roughly the same amount of damage, so just be aware of that. Okay, so the strike is slightly angled, but the damage is the same. So the other shovel has a more vertically angled strike down on the special, but this will do pretty much the same job, as you can see. All right, there is little variation at all with this. Okay, even the light attacks are pretty much the same. Okay, but your heavies are slightly side angled, so just be aware of that. Other than that, though, you can pretty much beat up most targets with your shovels. So if you wanted to choose a shovel, my personal choice would be the Munitorium Mark 7, as opposed to the Munitorium Mark 3. However, I intend on testing them both because I feel that they both have significant potential. What type of perks and blessings would I use? I probably use the exact same perks and blessings that I had before. Thrust, Uncanny Strike. As for your perks, whatever you can roll would be good, but Thrust and Uncanny Strike would generally be my perks of choice on the shovel. Okay, so that about covers it for the new Munitorium shovels. I hope that demonstration was helpful. Okay guys, so I did promise I would cover every single weapon, and that includes the Ogryn weapons. I do not play Ogryn, so forgive me if I get anything wrong. I really do not play this class at all. The original shovel for the Ogryn is called the Brute Brainer Mark III Latrine Shovel. It comes with 2 relentless attacks and a strike down for the light chain, and the heavy chain is a strike down with a relentless attack here. The special is actually a punch, a heavy punch that ignores stagger reduction and sets enemies up for follow-up attacks. So how does it feel in the field? Well, the light combos were basically good for dealing with hordes, alright? Or at least that's the way I see it. And the push attack is a nice little sweep, whereas the heavy attacks were sort of like a strike down and a vanguard, alright? So you could also uppercut people if you really wanted to. So walk up. I guess you could stagger and punch these guys if you really wanted to, yeah? Give them a little punch in the gut. So that is the old Ogryn shovel. Okay, stat-wise, I'm pretty sure they're all the same. This one comes with damage, crowd control, penetration, defenses, first target. Damage, crowd control, penetration, defenses, first target. Damage, crowd control, penetration, defenses, first target. So all the stats are the same. The next new shovel that was introduced was actually the Brute Brainer Mark V Latrine Shovel. This one comes with an attack chain that is relentless and strike down, strike down, strike down. So the light attack chain is more for single targets, whereas the heavy attack is more for groups. So let's see how this one feels. So for this version, you use the heavy attacks to clear groups. I give them all a smackdown like this. Whereas the light attacks is more for, you know, slapping people around. The special, of course, allows it to become practically a hammer. You can dish out a fair amount of damage, and I've seen people do the 1 or 2 taps on the crushers with some specialized Ogryn builds. If any of you specialize in this, well, you'll probably have a lot of fun. Baseline, though, with no perks and blessings, you don't really do all that much to care for armored targets, but I'm sure that can be modified. Yeah? Okay, so that's it for the Mark V Latrine Shovel. The other one is the Brute Brainer Mark 19 Latrine Shovel. Now, this one has the light attack combo as your clearing. The heavy attacks are all strike down, and the special is the same. So let's equip this one, and we'll do that. Okay, so for this one, if you really want to clear hordes, you'd probably go around slapping them like this. And you could just sort of walk through hordes, slapping them left, right, center. Yeah? Your strike downs would be kind of like that for this particular shovel. So I guess if you really wanted to bash a few heads, you could kind of do it like that. Strike downs deal fair amounts of damage anyway. Now the heavy attack here deals the same amount of damage, so don't worry. Regardless of which shovel you do, the heavy attack is the same. Alright, so whichever one you prefer, I leave that up for you Ogryns to decide. I am not very savvy with your weaponry, but that is basically a good demonstration of the shovels for the Ogryn. If any of you find a use for this, you know, go ahead, let me know, yeah? Okay, let's talk about the chain axes. The old chain axe is called the Orestes Mark IV Assault Chain Axe. All right, I managed to roll one here. It's got low defenses, but that doesn't matter. The offensive stats are all above 70, so that's what we need for this comparison. The light attacks are all strike downs on this one, and the heavy attacks are all Vanguard. Okay, the new chain axe is, and by the way, their stats are the same. They've got damage, mobility, penetration, defenses, shredder. This one's got damage, mobility, penetration, defenses, shredder, so same, right? The new chain axe is Orestes Mark XII Assault Chain Axe, and this one, the light attacks are all relentless and the heavy attacks are all strike down. So it's a reversal of the previous pattern, where the previous pattern, you see, was all strike down and then Vanguard here. So the old chain axe, basically how this worked was that when using the old chain axe, if you need to deal with a horde, you would use the heavy attacks to saw through their heads. All right, so this has received a buff to its attack speed. It's now a lot faster than it used to be. All right, and if you had to deal with something individually, you just do the light attacks. But the light attacks had the habit of catching, so a lot of people didn't like that. When it comes to muties, the heavy attack could easily saw through one. All right, but armor targets, it wasn't so great. Again, because the angle, you weren't really hitting the head. And even if you would use the light attack, you wouldn't deal as much damage. So armor proved to be a bit of a problem for the older chain axe. All right. This is without any perks though, because with perks, you can actually end up doing quite a bit. All right. But if you wanted to go for the head, the older chain axe is probably not the smartest way of doing it. All right. So something like that. The new chain axe is different because the new chain axe, okay, let me show you. The new chain axe offers a light attack chain for dealing with hordes. So the new chain axe has the light attack chain for dealing with hordes, all right? It's not that damaging, but it is fairly fast, okay? And you can use it without any catching. If you use the heavy attacks will rev up, okay, and strike down on your target. This has a nice effect of dealing, you know, much like with several of the other weapons that are in the series. The strike down basically can saw through a mutie, guaranteed, because the heavy attack is a strike down, dealing more damage to a single target. Alright, you can even almost kill a Reaper, like so. And even Crushers will take quite a bit of damage from this, assuming you go for the head. So the strike down attack makes it very easy to actually strike the head, as you can see. So yeah, this thing is pretty darn good. So if you ask me which one I like better, I've played both on the veterans so far, and my personal favorite is definitely the Mark XII, simply because it's easy to use in the field. The other version, the Mark IV, is still good. Don't ever let me, don't ever think that it's not good. It also depends on the pattern which you prefer, because the Vanguard heavies have been sped up, so they actually deal quite well with hordes right now. You have to choose for yourself. But both are actually very viable. My personal choice, though, is the Mark XII, simply because the Mark XII has a much better attack pattern, in my opinion. And are you really going to give up a strike down rev attack? I don't think so. I'm not going to give that up. In fact, several other weapons have the same thing, and it's pretty good. It feels so good sawing through a mutant. So, not going to lie on that, all right? That is it for the chain axes. Okay, so let's talk about the Eviscerators now. The Eviscerator, the original Eviscerator in the game, was the Tigris Mark II Heavy Eviscerator. This one came with a light attack chain that had a strike down, Vanguard, Vanguard, strike down, and the heavy attack was a Vanguard and then a strike down pattern. This meant that if you wanted to use this, now stats on both the Eviscerators are the same, by the way. So they both come with damage, penetration, shredder, cleave targets, and mobility. The new one is exactly the same. That's the Mark 15. You can see damage, penetration, cleave targets, mobility, shredder. All right. So stat-wise, they are pretty much the same. Where they differ is more or less their pattern. So the original Tigris Mark II Heavy Eviscerator, if you wanted to deal with hordes, you'd basically start out with your massive Vanguard swing. Then you could swing twice and then do... Oops, sorry. I don't play the Eviscerator, so I'm not really very good. But basically, you would do something like that. You could alternate between the heavies, light, heavy, light. This is the kind of pattern that I think worked. The push attack was a sweep, all right? But the problem for this one, I think, occurred because if you wanted to do your heavy rev-up attack, it would always be kind of a it would always be a Vanguard rev up. If you wanted to do a strike down, you'd have to use the light version, which wasn't very conducive. All right, that's the problem with the old Eviscerator. The old Eviscerator, however, could still definitely take out a mutie. All right. Now, assuming you're running a Zealot with a bleed talent, you could still, like with a light swing, you could deal a significant amount of damage. All right, let me just quickly kill this. With the heavy, I believe you could still take out a mutie. Yeah, you could. So you could saw a mutie up with a heavy attack. This is with no perks and blessings. All right, but your problem would be armor targets. Now, with the new Eviscerator, the attack pattern is a lot better. Even though I don't even play this weapon, I can already see that the attack pattern is quite a bit better than before. Now, I've rolled one with low mobility but decent enough damage, penetration, and shredder. I try to keep the stats for these important damage dealing modifiers. I try to keep them as close to 70 as possible, all right, so that we can have a fair comparison. Now, for this one, right, the attack pattern is basically a series of relentless and vanguard attacks for your light attacks, and the heavy attacks are strictly strike down. This actually makes it feel a lot better than the other Eviscerator. Why? Simply because when you rush up against hordes, all right, all you get are these amazing vertical sweeps that could literally cleave through everything. All right, this is with no perks, no blessings, nothing. All right, you could literally sweep your way through these guys. Okay, then when it comes to armored targets, you have your heavy rev up strike down, which, as you can see, does a significant amount more damage because you can easily target a weak spot with it. So if you have to deal with some big guy like that, not only do you get the bonus of the strike down itself, but you can really saw through targets by hitting. You can really saw through targets by hitting the weak spot and dealing extra damage. Okay, in fact, you can one-shot that. On muties, the effect is even more pronounced. Even without a single weak spot hit, you can just saw through the mutie guaranteed. So this makes in my opinion, the new Eviscerator quite a bit better. But of course, I leave it up to the Zealots to actually determine whether or not this is the case. For me personally, if I had to do an Eviscerator build and if I had to pick an Eviscerator, I'm telling you guys right now, I would probably pick the Mark 15. All right, because honestly, the pattern on the Mark 15 is really, really nice. Not gonna lie on that. It seems to be quite a dangerous weapon. Okay, so that's it for the Eviscerator. Let's move on. Okay, so let's talk about the chainswords. The old chainsword was called the Cadia Mark IV Assault Chainsword. It had a light attack chain with a strike down, 2 vanguards, and a strike down. The heavy attack chain was purely vanguard. The stats are exactly the same as the Mark 13G. Okay, so if you're looking at the Mark 13G, the Mark 13G, which is right here, has the exact same stats. Damage, penetration, finesse, shredder, mobility. All right, and we have up here, damage, penetration, finesse, shredder, mobility. Now, they differ mostly in their attack pattern, but the Cadia Mark IV Assault Chainsword basically suffered from the same problems that the Eviscerator suffered from. So, when it comes to the attack pattern and chain, the vanguard attacks on the heavies were designed for dealing with hordes, as you can see. But because the light attack chain did very little in terms of different damage, like the damage was not very different at all, most people just spammed the light attacks to deal with hordes anyway, especially if you had attack speed increases. When it comes to muties, if you wanted to saw through them, you had to use the vanguard heavy, which left them with a little dot, assuming that you had no perks and blessings on your chainsword. Also, dealing with armor was a serious issue, as you can see. Unless you get a lucky critical, you're not going to do very much with your heavies. Even at your lights, which are strike downs on the first strike, don't deal very much. As you can see, it's the exact same problem that the Eviscerator had. Now, let's swap this over to a nice little Mark 13G, and we'll have a look at the difference. Now, I happen to roll a Mark 13G that had roughly the same penetration as this. The damage and shredder stats are close enough, so we're going to use this as the comparison, all right, since it'll be a relatively fair comparison. For the Mark 13G, the attack pattern is strike down, but with 3 vanguards, and the heavy attack is double strike down and then a vanguard. So what this basically means is that if you want to use this new chainsword, right, and you want to deal with hordes, same kind of thing as before, all you got to do is spam your light attacks and hordes are going to die. Okay, this is especially true if you've got a lot of attack speed. But where the difference is much like with the Eviscerator, you can deal with muties more easily because you get a strike down, which is pretty much going to kill them. Alright, so you have a lot more damage on your rev attack because it is a strike down. Alright, for armored targets, you're still probably not going to do very much. Alright, because hitting the head, like the angle is slightly off to the side, but it is loads better than what you had before, because for most of these, you're going to charge up a heavy and then go through them anyway. So, like I said, it is loads better than what we had before. In fact, even your light attack is a strike down, so you still deal fair amounts of damage. So if you're not a fan of the whole using the Vanguard heavies to deal with hordes, and you just want to chop through hordes really quickly, this Chainsword is probably your best bet. Alright? So between both Chainswords, they have similar stats and similar attack patterns, but for me personally, if you are the type to spam light attacks, you know, I would use the Mark 13 as opposed to the Mark 4. But again, the choice is yours. It depends on how much you value the rev attack, and for me, the strike down on the rev attack is a major booster to overall damage. So for me, the Mark 13G is the better choice simply because strike down is great for your revved up attacks. Okay, that about covers it for the differences in the Chainsword. Okay, ladies and gents, let's talk about the revolvers. The old revolver is the Zerona Mark IIA Quick Draw Stub Revolver. Although it's called a Quick Draw Stub Revolver, this one is the slow and precise version, where you have a semi-automatic hip fire, alright, and an aim down sights for your secondary action. This one is the high-powered damage-dealing revolver, whereby you can penetrate through targets. Like if I shoot the body, I hit the target behind the maniac, and you have to reload rounds one at a time, right? This is the high-precision version of the revolver. The other one, okay, the new one, is called, scroll down, the Agrippina Mark 14 Quick Draw Stub Revolver. This one has a braced semi-automatic secondary action, and it does not actually penetrate through enemies. Alright? The total ammo reserves in comparison to the 65 of the main revolver, assuming that you have the fully loaded talent, alright, is 102. Excuse me. So this one has more ammo reserves, but the rounds do not penetrate the target. Thank you to Yabs for correcting me on this. Unfortunately, I had thought that it would penetrate, but as you can see, when I was firing fast, it looked like it was penetrating through, but it actually doesn't. So if you take it one step at a time, let's crouch here, the rounds do not penetrate in any way, shape, or form, whether it's braced or not. Even changing your blessings does not affect this. When it comes to heavily armored targets, this one, even if you crit all the way, doesn't really kill a crusher in a full salvo. Whereas the Zerona actually will, with crits, of course. So the Zerona is a much higher powered revolver, where you can, assuming you get lucky, alright. Wow, I even missed a shot and still killed the crusher, so actually that would have taken 4 shots if it wasn't for me missing a shot. And this is at base with no perks and no blessings. If you had your perks and blessings in, you could do a lot more. This one is basically designed as a devastating, okay, headshotting killer machine. You use it to absolutely devastate your targets, as well as to penetrate through targets coming out on the other side, and dishing out all the damage you need. Yeah. With a good crit, most targets are gonna die. When it comes to your big bad crusher boys, you are always good. You can 2-tap them with the right build and with the right blessings, but generally the revolver is not going to do as much as the plasma gun. Okay. That being said, which one do I think is better? For me, based on the build that I plan on releasing for this, I find the Zerona Mark IIA to be the better of the two revolvers. Why? Because the penetration helps a lot in the field. These weapons are generally highly precise weapons, and being able to aim down sights and take out targets at a distance turns the Zerona Mark IIA into a sniper. Whereas the other one, the Mark 14, while it is great for role-playing as Cassidy from Overwatch, the big problem is that if you're going to use this, you are not going to penetrate through targets, which means if somebody gets in the way of your shot, you're not going to hit the target, and hitting the head, which is the whole purpose of the precise type weapons, is a little bit harder. Alright, especially because this is braced. So if you want to hit the head, at a distance, as you can see, it gets a lot more difficult to do what you're supposed to do. Alright, there's also some element of damage fall off, which I think you can see at that distance, yeah? Now, you can still do fairly well against things that are not carapace armored, so don't hesitate to fan your revolver if you feel like you want to be Cassidy. Alright, you want to roleplay as Cassidy, feel free to do that. But if you don't want to, then that's absolutely alright. In terms of reloading, this one is obviously a lot faster because you can just reload everything with a speed loader. So you make up your own mind on that. For me, the Zerona Mark II is the way to go, but hey, if you like this, go for it, alright? I'm not going to stop you from role-playing and living out your dreams as Cassidy. I was super excited for this, but quite frankly, the Zerona Mark II won out, in my opinion. Okay, that about covers it for the revolvers. Okay, ladies and gents, let's talk about the Laspistol. The older version of the Laspistol is the Actran MG Mark II Heavy Laspistol. The stats are damage, mobility, stability, ammo, and stopping power. And the new Laspistol, alright, the new Laspistol is called the Cantrail Mark X Heavy Laspistol. It comes with damage, mobility, stability, ammo, stopping power. So the stats are the same on both of these, okay? But for the old one, the old version of this weapon, right? It's generally considered a highly precise gun, all right, where you can hit headshots with relative ease. You can fire fairly fast as well, and it is very stable. It does relatively high critical weak spot damage, so if you really want to use, like if you're gonna play Cassidy, you may as well play this. All right, because compared to the revolvers don't actually do as much as this in terms of how balls to the walls awesome it is, all right? It even comes with a little push that you can use if you want to be gangsta. Now, when it comes to the new gun, the new version again, now this one is without any perks or blessings, so you throw perks and blessings into the mix, you can get some good stuff done. The new one is basically a stripped down las gun. It comes with a longer barrel, all right, as you can see here. I'm just gonna zoom in for a second because I just want to make sure I equip it first. It comes with a much longer barrel, okay? Everything else is pretty much the same, and it is considered a high damage, but it also has, it's considered very high damage, but it has poor stability. So how does it feel? Well, when you equip this one, note that it is slow. It is slow firing, and it has a bit of a jerk when it shoots. So if you try to rapidly fire, you're not going to get the same results as you did, all right, with the Laspistol. Now, that being the case, all right, it also consumes more ammo per shot, if I'm not wrong. Due to the poor stability, you're not going to want to hip fire this a lot as compared to the other Laspistol. The other Laspistol was very stable, so you could kind of belt out the rounds. This one, you kind of want to aim a little bit, all right, so it's more of a precision weapon, and in terms of its ammo efficiency, it is a bit poorer. But if you really, really want to kill something, especially in the lower difficulties, this is a great choice, okay? So this one consumes about 3 ammo per shot. If I swap back to the other one, I'm pretty sure it consumes slightly less. It's either 2 or 1 ammo per shot, but it is definitely less. Give me a second. I have to find it again. There it is. Okay. This other version, yeah, it's 2 ammo per shot. So in terms of ammo efficiency, this thing is much more stable. So if you really had to shoot and kill something, just as an example, this is much faster to fire, and it's very stable, so you can hit heads relatively easily, you see? Well, depending on your build, of course, but hitting heads is, you know, very easy with this version of the Laspistol. So it depends on what you want to do with your Laspistol. Me personally, I would not use the new one, because the hip fire is very inaccurate and you do have to fire at a distance most of the time. And yeah, the stability is just whack, and that is the other one. Now, both of these have very high stability, which is why I use these two for the comparison. Although this one has much lower damage and stopping power than the other one that I rolled, quite frankly, their stabilities are very high. So even with high stability, you can see that this one, even with 79% stability, it has a jerk to it every single time you fire. So if you ask me which one is better, I would say the Actran MG Mark II is still the more favored Laspistol, because the damage is not drastically different. With perks and blessings, I'm sure you could get the MG Mark II to clear quite a few of the targets, and even the targets that it doesn't clear, I'm sure you could clear it quite well with this. So do think about it, do consider it. Both guns, if I'm not wrong, suffer quite a bit against Carapace armor. Almost forgot to do that, but as you can see, other than the crits, you're not going to do very much against Carapace armor targets, even with the focus target keystone. All right. So if I were to slap on, say, this one versus a Carapace armor target, you're still going to do diddly. So although it's slightly better against Carapace armor targets, being a heavy Laspistol, it's still not going to do very much. So it's really up to you whether or not you want to use this gun. I guess those who don't really want to play a last gun but still want to get the kind of viability on this, you know, with the right perks and blessings, of course you can hit some serious breakpoints, but it's really up to you what you want to play. This is basically a last gun in pistol form. So you want to roleplay as a commissar, this would be your weapon of choice. And it does fairly decently against unyielding targets, but not against Carapace. I mean, this one technically does. You can hit crits consistently, but that's based on whether or not you can actually hit the crits consistently. Just be aware of your ammo consumption. All right. Okay. That's about it for the Laspistol demonstration. Sorry it took so long. Okay, guys, let's talk about the combat knife. The combat knife, the old version, was called the Catachan Mark III. Now, this version of the combat knife, okay, is honestly, in my opinion, still the better version of the combat knife. I'll explain why in a little bit, but basically, this one came with a light attack chain of assassin attacks, right? And the heavy attack chain was all strike down. This was very single target damage focused, all right, for the original combat blade. Now, when it comes to hordes, the combat blade's methodology used to be basically strike the body, and then if you've got a guy that hasn't died off yet, right, you want to hit the head with your push and then strike down. Okay, this deals a fair amount of damage. All right, so this is how most knife zealots, you'll see them dealing with hordes. All right, they'll be doing something like this. When it comes to the armored targets, what we used to do, now this is without perks and blessings, but basically we'd get them bleeding and then we'd strike them down using this attack to strike the head. And with Mercy Killer, you could end up dealing a lot of damage. You could also deal extra damage to bleeding targets with Mercy Killer by using heavy attacks on the head. Now, with the ability to use the special attack to get a very quick strike on the head, as you can see, all right, you can end up dishing out a lot with this. So this is basically how knife zealots play. You start by bleeding the target, and then you will strike down on the head for extra damage, dealing massive crits, kind of like that. So nothing has changed about the old combat knife's playstyle, obviously. The new combat knife, on the other hand, uses, now this one is a really poorly rolled one with very low mobility, but because it's got good damage stats and good finesse, we're actually going to use this for the comparison. The new combat knife, okay, where it differs mainly, now I just wanted to make sure I equipped that first. The new combat knife mainly differs in the fact that the light attack chain is exactly the same, but the heavy attack chain has 2 vanguard attacks and then a strike down. So previously it was all strike down with the combat blade. Now you start out with 2 vanguard chains and then a strike down stab. All right. So pretty much nothing has changed for dealing with hordes. You can still do exactly what you did before, but instead of a strike down type push attack, you've got a stab, which is pretty okay. But when it comes to the stab push attack, right, it feels really weird. As you can see, like, you can still do decent damage. Like, it's not very much different from what you had before, but because it doesn't seem to, like, strike down on the head, yeah, I don't know. To me, it feels a bit more awkward, and it doesn't seem to deal as much as, you know, you'd think. But overall, I mean, both knives still share the same light attack, which people often use. You can also use the same special, all right? So the special has not changed at all. It does tiny bit less damage than the Mark III, but realistically it's not even a problem. All right, you can still do all that you used to do with the new combat knife, just that the heavy attacks are now like horde based. So rather than having to strike down consistently, you have to deal with 2 vanguard attacks and then do a strike down. So you could realistically do a pattern that was kind of like that, and then you can go straight into the strike down. But it's really up to you whether or not you prefer this. Personally, on a personal level, right? The reason why now you'll notice that I have I tend to favor the weapons that have a consistent attack pattern. So when it comes to the Catachan Mark III, it has a much more consistent attack pattern. I cannot find the one that I was using before. Was it this one? I think it was. Darn. I lost my place. I think it was this one. Yeah, so I tend to favor the ones that have a more consistent pattern because it helps me neatly separate the attacks. But if you find that you like the pattern of the new one, then absolutely go for it. For me personally, the Mark III is the more suitable knife simply because the assassin chain is basically unchanged and the strike down chain is much more useful if I really need to stab a target in the head. I know I'm going to get a guaranteed strike down rather than worrying about a vanguard attack being thrown in between. So that's my take on the knives.